That's the only reason why they suspended my account. I am for Bongbong Marcos and Bongbong Marcos is my president. I have not posted, I have not said anything offensive. Contrary to their claim that I have violated their community standards. The suspension on my FB official page is censorship on the highest degree and interference on my sovereign act.
We begin tonight's broadcast with a clip of Attorney Vic Rodriguez shortly after Facebook suspended his account. Rodriguez is the spokesperson of presidential candidate and survey frontrunner Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Screenshots shared by Rodriguez showed that the platform had informed him that his account had been suspended due to activity that it did not follow the platform's community standards. But Rodriguez cries foul over the social media giant's decision, which he suspects had to do with him being a supporter of Marcos Jr. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Gretchen Ho. You're watching The Big Story. After calling out Facebook for censoring his account, the social media giant has reportedly restored Attorney Vic Rodriguez's account after it was incorrectly flagged as an imposter account. Marian Fernandez with The Big Story.
With less than 2 weeks before the May 9 polls, the Facebook account of Attorney Vic Rodriguez, spokesperson of presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr., was suspended. Based on screenshots provided by Rodriguez, Facebook said his account does not follow community standards. But for Rodriguez, Meta's action was due to his support for Marcos Jr.
That's the only reason why they suspended my account. I am for Bongbong Marcos and Bongbong Marcos is my president. I have not said anything offensive. Contrary to their claim,
Rodriguez maintained that he only posts about their official statements and campaign rallies. Facebook initially advised Rodriguez that he can appeal the suspension within 30 days. But that may not be necessary for now. Meta has said that Rodriguez's account has already been restored after it was incorrectly flagged as an imposter account. But even without a SOCMED account, Rodriguez said they will continue to reach the electorate via traditional means. On Monday, in fact, the Marcos Camps campaign in Mindanao continued, with Marcos Jr. visiting places where he lost in 2016, including Lanao del Norte. There, Marcos Jr. received an endorsement from Governor Anging Quibranza di Maporo. Marcos Jr. also visited Cagayan de Oro City in Misamis Oriental. He won in CDO back in 2016 but lost to Vice President Leni Robredo in the whole province. Some local leaders in the region continue to express support for the so-called Rosa, or the tandem of Leni Robredo and Mayor Sara Duterte. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
With the peak of the campaign period, online disinformation continues to spread rapidly. No small thanks to troll farms, which instigate hostility in social communities. In an interview with One News The Chiefs, disinformation researcher in Harvard University and University of Massachusetts Amherst Professor Jonathan Ong says top PR officials and politicians should be held accountable for the proliferation of troll farms. Just recently, fact-checking initiative CheckPH determined that disinformation for political gain is rampant, with presidential candidate Marcos Jr. benefiting the most from disinformation, while Vice President Leni Robredo as the biggest victim of fake news.
I think what that needs is like deeper investigations. I think like audit mechanisms as well. I think kasama din dapat dito BIR. Kailangan digital investigation, kailangan audit and taxation mechanisms as well.
Is the takedown of Facebook accounts a form of censorship when the account does not follow community standards? That big question and more with journalist and Professor Danilo Arao of the University of the Philippines. Professor Arao, welcome to The Big Story.
Yeah. Hello, good evening, Gretchen, and thank you for having me.
Okay. Professor, puntahan po natin yung pagsuspinde doon sa account ni Attorney Vic Rodriguez. He says this is because he is the chief of staff of Bongbong Marcos Jr. And he says this is censorship and digital terrorism. Your reaction to this?
Well, Facebook has already said that it's basically a mistake because it's an imposter account. To say that this is censorship is to, make a mountain, make a molehill rather out of a mountain because it's a non-issue. Actually, over the weekend, Gretchen, I should tell you that some of the posts of Contradaya, as well as my own posts, were incorrectly flagged by Facebook. But after a few hours, these were restored after we disputed the decision made by Facebook. So it's a non-issue. So he should just keep quiet about it and not make a big issue out of it.
Okay. Actually, follower niyo po ako sa Twitter. So nakita ko yung pag-flag sa Contradaya at I think it was a post about the party list race. You did the fact-checking and then Facebook took it down. Is there anything that bothered you when it comes to how the community standards are, being implemented across different accounts on Facebook?
Yes, to be fair, Facebook is doing something about disinformation, but apparently the algorithm is very, very tricky because it can be gamed by peddlers of disinformation. That's very unfortunate. Just for the record, Contradaya's posts on a fact check were apparently flagged because we used as one of the sources an article published by the Philippine News Agency. Now, the PNA as a state media entity has been quite notorious for red tagging as well as other forms of disinformation and malpractices in journalism bordering on public relations. Now, some of the articles there may still be somewhat informative, but for the most part, this is basically a disinformation peddler as well. So they tend to justify the tyranny and impunity characteristic of the Duterte administration. So the challenge for Facebook as well as other social media platforms would be to mix algorithm with human intervention. Now, a long time ago, Gretchen, I should put on record that we already raised that with Facebook. There should be a clear, more honest-to-goodness partnership with journalism and with journalists and the academe in terms of curbing disinformation. There is already a wide literature here and abroad on the science behind the industry that is fake news. So it's just a matter of properly implementing certain mechanisms within social media responsible gatekeeping to ensure that we can somewhat eradicate or minimize the extent of this information.
Okay, just to be clear to our viewers, it's a very tricky, I think, concept, also a thin line between freedom of expression and fighting disinformation. So when do you say exactly it's censorship and when is it not?
Okay, censorship happens when there is outright suppression of the truth. Now, gatekeeping, however, would be the process in which you select what you think would be the most relevant and the most significant information that you should put out to the public. If it's an outright lie, then definitely this information should not be published, aired, or broadcast. Why is this so? Because in terms of truth-telling, there are only two components of it: factual accuracy and contextual accuracy. You don't pit at the truth with a lie because that would be a false balance and that would be a misconception or even bastardization of neutrality and objectivity. Because what we want in order to ensure a higher level of discourse would be one truth juxtaposed with the other truth based on different analysis, but you have the same data sets. In other words, we should not dispute the facts. The facts are the facts. These are statistics, these are qualitative and quantitative information. Perhaps the differences will be in the kind of analysis that you will be using in terms of making sense of the reality. So that's where truth-telling becomes important. But the lies, for example, if I tell you right now, Gretchen, that the earth is flat, then that would defy all forms of logic and all forms of evidence. So if I tell you that the earth is flat, then you should not air that particular statement right away because you know that it's not the truth. Or if I tell you right now that, I'm sorry, Gretchen, go ahead.
Alam na alam natin no, na these are concepts that are we've heard time and time again, but it's worth
Yes.
revisiting and repeating in a time of rampant disinformation. Maraming salamat. That was journalism professor Danilo Araw of the University of the Philippines. These are the other big stories tonight. VP Leni Robredo's campaign sortie in Talisay, Cebu was canceled today as gubernatorial aspirant Ace Durano has decided to support the presidential bid of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. instead. OCTA Research Group says COVID-19 cases can spike anytime soon, saying the Philippines could have no less than 5,000 cases per day. And Elon Musk has struck a deal to buy social media platform Twitter for $44 billion. What happens next? We find out after the break. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho. The youth voting population is projected to spell the outcome of the upcoming elections. But with online disinformation targeting the youth, what might this mean for how the age group will make its choice on May 9? Find out in my report. As the May polls draw near, where does the youth stand in the upcoming elections? According to OCTA's Tugon ng Masa presidential survey from April 2 to 6, over 75% of those between ages 18 to 24 will likely vote for Ferdinand Marcos Jr. This is the highest haul for Marcos Jr. amongst all the other age groups. Mayor Isko Moreno and Vice President Leni Robredo are way behind. Marcos Jr. remains strong in the 25 to 34 age bracket at 62%. But are youth voters, compromising majority of first-time voters, firm with their choices? An expert says changing a young Filipino voter's mind will not be an easy feat.
We have young people, students who did not undergo any deep education in history. The textbooks are very uncritical when it comes to martial. Kasi may napapatakbo ng disinformation, kinino siya kumakalat dahil sa mga bata. Would be much easier to convert adult Filipinos than it is to convert young Filipinos.
In the recent Pulse Asia survey, though, both youth and senior brackets had the largest movements. From 71% in February, Marcos Jr. lost 14 percentage points in the 18 to 24 age group, while Robredo gained 16 points from 14% to 30%. The same movement for those above 65, with Marcos Jr. losing 14 percentage points and the vice president gaining 19. Cornelius said that campaign rallies may have had a hand in these movements, and with more big-ticket endorsements to come, a lot can still change. On the rampant disinformation online, meanwhile, he encourages the public to do intergenerational conversations, something another professor agrees with.
Let's practice deliberative voting. So let's begin with the premise that the candidates running for office are flawed, to deliberate with people who are not like you. And when we do this, our views become clearer.
But what of those who say, just respect my opinion?
I respect your opinion so much, that's why I want to understand you. Leaving you alone is actually a sign of disrespect. Leaving you alone with your opinion means I don't care.
Enjoying our individual right to vote need not be something we go through alone. After all, our choice will determine the nation's fate for the next 6 years. Gretchen Ho, We Are One News. Local absentee voting for more than 83,000 qualified voters is set to begin on Wednesday. Members of the Philippine National Police, the armed forces, and government workers will vote in polling centers as designated by their offices. Members of the media, meanwhile, will vote in the Comelec office where they signed up. Local absentee voters have to present their ID. They will only get to vote for national positions, including party lists. And since manual ballots will be used, the poll body has one request for local absentee voters.
Please write legibly kasi this is manual para hindi naman mahirapan yung SBI namin to count to count the ballots. So legibly tapos yung buong pangalan ninyong desired candidate.
Vice President Leni Robredo's supposed third visit to vote-rich province Cebu has been canceled. This after a gubernatorial candidate pledged his support for her rival. For updates, we have Jem Avancenia reporting to us via phone from Talisay, Cebu. Jem, how is the situation there and what are the details that led to the VP's canceled appearance?
Yes, Sunny, better Cebu than here in Talisay, Cebu. For the Durano, is now on the Durano. Yes, this is also noted as well that Vice President Robredo absent here at the better Cebu rally. Robredo's first visit was cancelled after Cebu gubernatorial candidate Felix Durano announced his endorsement of presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Cebu Vice Governor Hilario Durano of Durano apologized to Robredo's supporters who were expecting her appearance tonight, citing that Durano was bound to follow his Partido Filipino sa pagbabagos recent endorsement of Marcos Jr. Despite their differing views, the media assures the people of Cebu that they are still have their best interest in mind and not their personal. Gretchen Acresia Taide, a known businessman in Durano, were also here in Durano to support the Durano tandem. Former Justice Hilario and his wife is also here in Durano. Gretchen?
All right, maraming salamat, Jem. That was Jem Avancenia reporting from Cebu. Time for another quick break. More of the big stories when we return. still watching The Big Story, I'm Gretchen Ho. OCTA research is warning of a possible COVID surge in the country driven by subvariants from abroad. But experts say it would be manageable if Filipinos will keep their masks on and get their booster shots. Maricel Halili with The Big Story.
The OCTA research group has warned the public of another possible COVID-19 surge if new subvariants enter the country. OCTA fellow Dr. Guido David said active cases can reach a total of 50,000 to 100,000 or about 5,000 to 10,000 cases a day. This projection is patterned after South Africa and India, where David said the Philippines takes after whenever hit with subvariants.
Possible na yung surge ay maging may similar trajectory do sa nakita natin noong January na mabilis siya makapanghawa, mabilis dumami at baka mabilis rin bumagsak yung bilang ng kaso dahil we have a high number of vaccinations in certain key areas.
Despite their projection, the OCTA research group clarified that they do not recommend the imposition of another lockdown.
What may happen in the next few weeks is manageable po. Given our existing capabilities, wala na, nag-improve na on treatment, lalo na nag-improve na rin yung response ng government at local government, kaya ho i-manage yan.
Rai emphasized the need for full compliance to health standards and a more aggressive vaccination drive. This view is shared by infectious disease expert Dr. Edsel Salvania. But contrary to OCTA, he believes that another COVID-19 surge in the country is unlikely, given that the country's positivity rate is low 1.1%.
Although kinakabahan na rin ako sa dami ng rallies na nangyayari, pero nananatili po talaga yung protection ng paggamit ng mask at yung pag-boost at pagbakuna po natin.
The World Health Organization and the Health Department earlier warned the country of a possible surge mid-May due to the election season. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
In world news, billionaire Elon Musk has reached a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion with a promise to reduce censorship on the platform. This move will privatize the 16-year-old company, which will now require shareholder and regulatory approval. Talks of a deal appeared uncertain last week until Musk wooed Twitter shareholders with financing details. Under their terms of agreement, stockholders will receive $54.20 in cash for each share of Twitter common stock. At hindi pa daw siya ready. A video of a guy getting ready to slide down a swimming pool went viral on social media as he got pushed down by one of the staff a little too early. So far, the video already has over 800,000 likes and 4 million views on TikTok.
Uy, kuya, wait lang! Wait lang, kuya! Si kuya naman eh! Hindi pa naman ako ready! Hindi pa ako ready eh! Sabi ko, wait lang!
Hindi pa rin siya ready pero natapos na. Congrats sa'yo. But a reminder for everyone, kung mag-video po kayo, make sure to have some poise and be ready. Joke lang. That wraps up today's Big Story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on, wash hands, and get vaccinated, Philippines. On behalf of Robbie Alampay, I'm Gretchen Ho, and we are One News.